Good afternoon. I would like to call the Instruction Committee meeting for the Frederick County School Board to order. The date is December 9th, 2024, and the time is 4:32, 4:33, something like that. We have an agenda before us. Do I have a motion for approval?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Yep. Okay. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
The motion has been made and properly seconded, I think. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. I will now pass over to Dr. Hummer to lead the meeting.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. It's great to see everybody. Welcome to everybody who's listening from home. I also want to recognize all of our staff that is here. We have some parents here as well that are willing to share some information in regards to our grading coalition. So we do have a couple items that we're going to present to you this evening. If you don't mind going to the next slide for me, Mrs. Knight. So we're first going to discuss our secondary grading coalition. We've done a lot of work with this. I'm very proud of our team for all the work that they've done. We have some items that we want to discuss with you this evening, as well as some next steps in regards to that. We also have our special education vision. So our special education team is here to talk about overview and next steps, as well as a yearly review of our restraint seclusion policy that is required by the policy. So we'll go over that, see if you have any questions. And then we also have our VLA update as well, Virginia Literacy Act update. And as I mentioned, there are no action items required at this time. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mrs. Knight and her team. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Hummer, and good evening or afternoon, Board Chair, and of course, members of the board, Dr. Hummer, and welcome back from Thanksgiving break. I hope you guys had a great time with your families. We enjoy having the opportunity to come before you this afternoon to share some updates in our department. And Dr. Hummer has just mentioned we're going to be starting with our secondary grading coalition update. And as he mentioned, a lot of work has gone into this, and I'm really proud of Dr. Myers and her team. So without further ado, Dr. Myers, if you can come on up and give us an overview of the secondary grading coalition and where we start. Thank you.
Thank you, members of the board. Dr. Hummer, thank you for allowing me to share on behalf of the Secondary Grading Coalition from these past actually year and a half, almost 2 years of work that they've done. And I'm honored that several of the members are here with us this evening, and including parents. And so it's been a great group. We've had 35 participants throughout the entire process. So it's really been a fantastic journey in learning for all of us. And the parents have provided great feedback at every turn. So when we began this process, we were talking initially about what is the purpose of grading? Why did we come here together, and what do we hope to achieve and learn as a result for the benefit of our students? So these were the three guiding questions that we started with. What information is to be communicated, who's our audience, and what's the intended goal with grading practices? So when we dove deeper into the communication, what we learned is the most important part on the part of a child and on the part of a parent is to understand their child's progress over time with benchmarks along the way. So what are they expected to learn and be able to do? And the be able to do is important as anything. They must have the knowledge, but can they apply the knowledge? And how do you reflect that such that it accurately represents mastery? How well they achieve these things, and whether or not that the level of performance is in line in what we would say is grade level appropriate for the course at that place and time in the school year. The primary audience, parents, families, and students. It's about communication. And what's the intended goal? How well the students are meeting the established learning goals and expectations. You will hear tonight a lot about the what. What are we doing? What did we do? But the why is what begins all of this. It is about the why. Why grading practices? What do we expect to learn from that? And looking at the mastery and the entire child. So our why is what guided us to our purpose statement. And this took us a long time to create. We really worked hard on it. We had a lot of feedback. And we finally said, okay, we can all come to a place of saying, we accept this. Not everybody got exactly what they wanted in this statement, but we felt like it was concise and clean, and it spoke to what I just shared. It speaks to communication of student achievement at a certain point in time. It reflects what the student knows and should be able to do, and that students will receive separate feedback between the cognitive and non-cognitive factors in learning. So learning habits have a vital role in monitoring student growth and success. They should not be confused with the academic part. These are the areas that we investigated, the cognitive and non-cognitive factors in grading, so the learning habits. Grading scales, as you know, through the series of sessions that we've conducted for you this fall, we looked at grading scales across not just the Commonwealth, but across the nation. What role do formative and summative assessments have in the grading process, and how should they be weighted? Minimum number of assignments and the maximum weight of an assignment within a given quarter, summative assessments, class rank, and recognizing honor graduates. These are all the areas we've spent the last 1.5 to 2 years working on. And so we wanted to define, as we started this process, we wanted to make sure we were on the same page as far as how do we establish and what do we know about cognitive and non-cognitive factors. And so these are the areas that we pulled out from our research and we started to investigate as far as both of them having equal importance. How do you represent that in reporting to parents and to students on their progress? From that, we developed the Learning Habits rubric. And so there was a team this past summer who finalized this rubric. It will be included in pending approval. It would be included in the student's record, in their cumulative file, and teachers would be reflecting on that on a quarterly basis. And so it shows the learning habits, it shows responsibility, self-regulation, commitment to their learning. As we know that a child might be what we'd call a student who doesn't always perform to the best of their ability, or they just struggle. But they are great citizens. They're contributing to their class and to their school. And we need to recognize that they have accepted a level of responsibility, and so they should be acknowledged as such. We then moved on to grading scales and teacher feedback from that. We sent out surveys to teachers, administrators, parents, and high school students. We received feedback from 483 staff members, 787 parents, and 870 students, high school students. And these are some of the questions we asked. What grading scale are you currently using? So you see 78% said they were using the 100-point scale. And what was their preference? 86%, almost 87% said the 100-point scale. In thinking back over the previous sessions I've done, the state, 90% of the state, school divisions across the state are using the 100-point scale. So it's definitely the prominent one that's being used. It's the most common one. We then moved on to formative and summative assessments. So formative assessments, as you know, are in real time. They may be things like projects that are not summative. They may be writing prompts, homework. There are various exit tickets, journal writing. There are many examples of formative assessments. And so when we went through this, as you can tell, it was not close. The faculty wanted formative assessments to count 30% and summatives to count 70%. And the feedback that we received on that was, we know that our students may have learned the material, but when they get to a big test at the end of a 9 weeks or unit, they may struggle to demonstrate that mastery. But if we do checks for understanding all along the way, they do better. And so as a result of that, we'd like to have better balance between the two so that we can monitor progress in real time and reflect that for the sake of the child. In doing our research on formative assessments, what we learned is even though ideally formative assessments would not be graded, and historically in Frederick County they have not, the challenge at the secondary level is sometimes, unfortunately, students are not motivated to achieve if it's not going to be reflected in their progress and their grades. So it is a motivating factor for them. It also allows them to progress monitor, and it provides the parents with a lot of communication and feedback because they're recording those grades. And so the students have that real-time feedback in the way of a formative and summative assessment. The maximum percentage a single assignment and the minimum number of assignments. The maximum percentage, as you see, it's not close again, was 44% believe that 20% should be the maximum. And we deal with this on not a regular basis, but we certainly do, where a child took one assessment and it majorly compromised their grade for the unit or for the 9 weeks because there were not enough assignments and potentially the percentage was extremely high. And so the feedback that we received was that 44% said no one assignment should count more than 20%. The minimum number of assignments, it was close between 8 and 9 assignments in the course of 9 weeks. The highest percentage, as you see there, is 9. Basically, what that converts to is students are receiving feedback on their mastery of learning once a week that's recorded into the grade book that parents then can see how the student's doing. So basically, the minimum is they're going to receive some sort of communication every week throughout the 9 weeks. Reassessments, if you look at this graph, you'll see it's almost reversed. At the middle school level, faculty responded 65% saying yes, they believe students should have the opportunity to take an assessment again for a summative assessment. The particulars of that I'll talk about in a minute. 35% said no, but at the high school level, it was, as you can see, 69 to 31. Interestingly, the members of the coalition, I gave them the same survey separate from the others because we wanted to see, we've been together for 2 years, we've done the research. How did they land on this one? 93% of them thought that students should have the opportunity to be reassessed. Only 7% said no. Because of that, though, we're going to pause on that at the high school level because there's more discussion needed, and we want to respect the feedback that we receive from our high school staff.
Quick question.
Sure.
Back to that last slide. Did the high school staff who responded give any reasons as to why they responded the way they responded? Was that data included in the questionnaire?
It was. They had the opportunity to provide comments. And some of the comments that we received, especially for AP dual enrollment courses, was we're preparing these students to be ready to take college level work. We feel like that it's important that they demonstrate mastery in real time when the assignment's given to them. So many of the comments were there. It was a maturation process.
Sure.
Also, they talked about that. And if we look at elementary to middle to high, elementary, as you know, is going to the true standard space grading. Middle school, if we did the reassessments at middle school, then it's a transition. And then by the time they get to high school, then reassessments are not occurring. So it shows that, as I said, maturation of the process. We had a lot of good feedback on that.
So I'm thinking that if this is something that the high school staff, given the reasons they've given, is it possible to divide it and just have middle school do reassessments and the high school not?
So as we make our way through, you'll see what the committee came up with on that. So yes, we did separate it out.
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Dr. Meyer, I actually received an email to this as far as the high school staff response. And I'll just read a little bit of it. I won't go through the whole thing. Yeah, it's a long one. It says, I currently teach AP Pre-Calculus, AP Calculus, AB, and AP Calculus BC. These courses are very rigorous and demanding, which is why these students can receive college credit through LRCC for successfully completing these courses. I do not feel that allowing students to retake assessments or forgiving missed work would accurately represent their abilities to perform. I definitely do not feel it would prepare my students for what they will experience in college or university. Even when I taught in other courses, I still held my students to a high expectation of performance, no matter what the job they will eventually do, being able to perform at a given task on the first try and completing those tasks by a deadline will be expected. I do not want my surgeon or technician changing my brakes to ask for another chance because they performed poorly on the first attempt, and no employer would tolerate an employee who was consistently missing deadlines. This would also greatly increase the workload of teachers if a student can retake any assignment as many times as they choose. I don't know if we're doing that. Then we as teachers must design multiple variations of every assignment. I've been told that AI can do it for you, but I promise you that isn't the case in my content. I am confident that many other teachers would agree, unless we are greatly simplifying our assessments, give the same assignments with no changes, or only use online resources that must be purchased. We will have to spend an enormous amount of time preparation for the students' requested retakes. I think that's kind of why we're seeing that in the high school level. I think our staff is overburdened with a lot of stuff that they have in their daily content and their daily task. It would seem to me that doing the retakes in high school would be a little bit more challenging.
And based on the feedback that was received and the comments that were made on the assessments, we agree. And so you'll see when we get to the recommendations, we do not speak to the high school with reassessments because of all those factors. And when we were creating this, or I created it based on the surveys, we took what the majority said, and that became our recommendation.
Okay.
Okay. So if they were permitted, we continued on because at that point we didn't know, how everything was going to play out. The next question was this: if they were allowed to retake an assessment, what's the highest percentage they can earn? And so you can see it's pretty split there between the 80% up to 100%. And so even though we may allow reassessments at the middle school level, we feel like more discussion is needed in this area because you don't see a predominant percentage there. You see a lot of, especially between the 80 and 100%. The Grading Coalition pretty much erred on the 100%, but they've done a lot of research and they've been part of this process for a while. So we will not make a recommendation on that at this point. Going back to communication, we asked the parents, do you know your child's class rank and does it matter to you? Again, it's almost flipped, where they don't know their child's class rank, but they do care.
But it does matter.
But it does matter. And so do you encourage your child to take weighted courses, AP or dual enrollment, so that it potentially improves his or her class rank? And you see it's somewhat split. The parents, though, provided good feedback on that. They said it's not just as simple as just wanting to bump the GPA. It's we want our kids to be challenged. Yes, we want them to be competitive for scholarships. We want all of these things. So it's not as simple as saying, I just want my child to be at the top of the class. Now, certainly that exists, but the feedback we received from them was great.
Okay.
here were the things we asked them what they thought it impacted. And if you recall back from a previous session with the Academy of College Admissions, they surveyed 185 colleges and universities across the nation, and only 5% of schools said that they put strong emphasis on class rank. And I know you can't see everything that's there on that slide, but as you can tell, the getting into college and scholarships were overwhelmingly the reason that parents believe class rank mattered. The others were giving a speech at graduation, getting a job, family expectations, non-college sports. So this will provide an opportunity for us to have greater conversation with our parents about the fact that really it's strength of schedule, it's the rigor of the classes, it's taking as many classes as you can. Those are the things that really impact admission into colleges. This one was a big one, the honor graduates, valedictorian, salutatorian, and Mr. Atkins, you gave feedback at a previous session where, what about a combination? So that students, the first and second, can be recognized, but also the students who had very high GPAs. The first time that we sent this survey out, I'll be honest with you, we forgot to include that option. And then we got feedback from staff and students and parents saying, well, what about this option? So I then sent the survey back out with that question, and I added the fourth option. Prior to that, overwhelmingly, the response was the Latin system. That's what everybody wanted to go to, which is the cum magna and cum laude system. Once we put in that fourth factor, you can see how it flipped. The green represents the combination of the two, valedictorian and the Latin system. So that was very telling. Notice that valedictorian by itself is the fourth choice in both settings. So that's very telling as far as where we are. The other part that we asked is, if you didn't have the valedictorian or salutatorian give the speech at graduation, who would you choose? And again, overwhelmingly, it was form a committee of their peers, administrators, and teachers, and make a decision based on that. That's not something we will necessarily rule on or recommend, but we just wanted you to see it.
Well, I have to say that when I came to this slide, after looking over them, I really enjoyed this one the most, because I think this gives an opportunity to students who wouldn't ordinarily have that opportunity.
Right.
And I think that creating a committee composed of admin, teachers, and students, they would choose perhaps a better candidate than just the valedictorian or salutatorian to give the speech.
Yeah, I think there's definitely merit for further conversation about it.
Oh, for sure. I
And,
would like
and so
to see
we
this.
will.
Good.
We will continue that conversation.
Yep, thank you.
Sure. And so here are our recommendations. These are not action items for the board at this point. This is simply where, based on the data that was received between the Grading Coalition, parents, students, and teachers and administrators, if we look at the data, this is where it landed. So report card learning habits are separated from the cognitive factors. Grading scale 100 point, formative and summative 30-70. The minimum number of assignments in a quarter is 9, basically once a week, and the maximum percentage any one grade can have is 20%. Middle school summative we want you to consider allowing reassessments at the middle school level with the exception of projects. At the high school, we would like for you to consider a combination of valedictorian, salutatorian, and the Latin system. You'll notice that at the high school level, we do not speak to reassessments because we felt like the feedback was such that we were not going to put that, we were not going to take that further at this point. So how did we do? When we started, we asked these questions of ourselves. Communication, reflection of what students know and are able to do, and separating academic and non-academic factors. Hopefully you've seen through this presentation communication woven into every aspect, from formative, summative to learning habits, communication is the backbone of what we're proposing. What a student knows and is able to do, moving into more of a formative kind of setting, that will be real-time feedback as far as what they know and are able to do. So the emphasis isn't so much on that one test at the end of a unit or at the end of 9 weeks, and then separating academic and non-academic factors. To be determined, reassessment on summative assessments, not including projects, will be allowed pending your approval at a later time. But the timeline, how much students will receive, and other factors still need to be determined. So if you wanted to go in that direction, we would then work with the middle school principals and teachers to figure out those details. And then if we were to make any changes to our grading practices, when would it take effect? Future considerations, which students will speak at graduation. There was evidence there, as we said, that we may want to take a deeper look at that, and that we did put in reassessment of summative assessments at the high school level. And the reason that we put that in there was our grading coalition, who's been part of this for a long time, they saw it very differently. And we're not ready to go in that direction. We respect the feedback we received. So it's just something that's out there, but certainly that would be something that you as the board would weigh in on that. So we're not recommending that at this time. Pending approval, next steps. The grading policy will need to be updated. We will create a division grading handbook at the elementary and second, middle, and high school level, clearly outlining so parents know exactly how grades are determined and communicated. Professional development will be provided to all teachers, especially regarding formative and summative assessments, and that we will be conducting a series of virtual sessions for parents. One of the things that popped out in my mind was the fact that their belief that their class rank has such an impact on college admissions, and so those are great topics for further conversation with them. These are the policies that, depending upon where the board decides to go with this, these are the policies that you will probably need to look at. The 316P, which is the one about, let me double check here, evaluation of student progress, uniform grading scale. It also speaks to grade level placement and intervention, which is not part of the work we've done. But if we're going to revisit potentially the policy here, that's something we probably would also like to take a look at potentially. The 316RB, even though that's not something that comes necessarily from the school board, that is the one that talks about valedictorian, class rank, GPA, report cards. The formative and summative assessments we would need to take a look at. And not included in any of this is 314P regarding homework. That was beyond the scope of this, but again, if we're going to potentially go in the direction of revisiting these policies, I would recommend that we take a look at that one too.
I agree 100%.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes my presentation. Again, I'd like to thank the members of the Grading Coalition because they've done a tremendous amount of work to create this and research it and bring this forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Myers before she departs? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Myers. Fantastic job. And at this time, I'd like to welcome our Director of Special Instructional Services and our Assistant Director of Special Instructional Services, in this order, Shamika McDonald and Ms. Kylan Kaufman, to talk to us about our special education vision and overview.
Good evening. So special education, our vision and, do we have a? Our vision, we're dedicated to create an inclusive environment that will equip students with disabilities with the skills to become equipped with, employed, enrolled, or enlisted and lead full and productive lives. In order to get there, our mission, we're committed to empowering students to achieve academic success by receiving the highest quality of education support provided by our exceptional staff members. So the overview or special education process, when there's a suspicion of a disability, parents or educational staff will refer to the special services referral team. From that team, if they feel that a comprehensive evaluation is warranted, then they would move into a comprehensive evaluation. If not, they would get back to the SSRT team and create a plan to support us to support the student. After the comprehensive evaluation is completed, they will determine eligibility. If eligibility is warranted and they claim that the student should be found with a disability, then we would move into an IEP plan. The individual education plan is created 30 days after eligibility. Afterwards, within that plan, students will be receiving specially designed instruction. And within that specially designed instruction, in order to report the progress that students are completing, those progress notes are completed quarterly. And every educational plan is reviewed annually, but can be reviewed at any time, requested by the team or the parent.
Quick question for you.
Yes.
This also includes 504s, doesn't it?
That does not include 504s.
It doesn't, just IEPs?
Yes.
I see.
Just IDEA.
All right, and who's on the special services referral team, the positions?
Yes, so you have the school principal, the school psychologist.
Okay.
If there is a suspicion within behavior, there may be a behavior analyst that's in that meeting. You would have a special education teacher, a general education teacher.
Or teacher, yeah, okay.
Yeah, a lead teacher if we have a lead at that school. School counselor, if warranted. Am I missing? Speech pathologist or OT. Typically, an OT would not be there. However, there have been times when an occupational therapist has been invited to the meeting.
Sure, thank you.
Yep.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, you asked a really good question, though, about 504s, and if I may, can I go chime in a little bit
You
on
sure
that?
can.
Is that all right? So the 504 plan and 504 process is quite similar.
Oh, yeah.
But it is different.
Yep.
It's under two different branches of the government, but essentially the 504 is for students with a medical diagnosis where they require some level of accommodations or supports. I think the best way to describe the difference between the two, if you want a very distinct answer, is for an IEP, it's for specially designed instruction, where a 504 is more for accommodations for them to access. So similar but different. And this is just a process just for the IEP, as she mentioned. So, and if there's any questions about that, more than happy to answer those.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So within Frederick County Public Schools, we have around 2,194 students with disabilities. These are all of your staff members that help support our students. For evaluations during the 23-24 school year, we have concluded 718 evaluations. Next, we're going to talk about the continuum of services and how those services support students in different environments.
So this graphic represents the full continuum of supports that we can offer to any student with a disability. It's not meant to be a linear stepped process, but it is looking at the least restrictive option that we can offer within the general education setting and consult or monitor services, all the way to the most restrictive placement that we could consider, which would be like a hospital or a residential facility. Most of these services do occur within the public day school, so you can see that those services are delineated there within the general education or special education classes. However, there are times that we're just not able to meet a student's unique needs within the public day school or the public day school. So we have to look at other outside placements such as public or private day school at NREP or other private day schools.
Before you move on
Yes.
to the next slide, for home-based or homebound services, the instructor or teacher for that, is that a teacher from the actual school that the student attends, or do we have a special position for that?
No, it's not necessarily from the school that the child attends. We work with Mary Moore, who's our bound specialist.
Okay.
And she secures teachers for those particular students.
Okay, and are they teachers from the division, or are they?
Yes, and often she's looking for volunteers within the homeschool. But if it's not necessarily at that child's school, they are teachers within the division.
Gotcha, and are they paid?
Oh, yes, they are paid.
Good, okay, thank you.
And they are in collaboration with the homeschool to continue that continuum of services.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you.
So we've been really working on this mission and vision and identifying the areas of focus for our team. Of course, compliance with federal and state regulations is something that is at the utmost importance for us. But we also want to look at, in partnership with our instruction department, that continuous professional learning for all special education staff, which leads to that high quality instruction and assessment for students. We have an inclusive practices plan, so we're in the last year of our inclusive practices plan. So we just want to make sure that every child has opportunities to the greatest degree possible with their typical developing peers. The other side of the education is that independence and employment. So we have a not placement specialist. What's Sue's position? A transition specialist that helps students that are leaving the K-12 education and moving into the workforce. We now have a parent resource center, which is Joy Kirk, and our parent and community engagement. And then again, school readiness and transition, we're really looking at the upcoming year at the transition from preschool to kindergarten, because that has been quite a challenge for our young learners to be ready for the kindergarten classrooms. And of course, as you're well aware, staff retention, all the things that we can do to help support our staff, to help them feel valued and remain here in Frederick County.
Quick question. And I appreciate, this is kind of what I've kind of been taking notes on. I get the mission, I get the vision, I like it. The areas of focus sounds like kind of your how, you know? So as far as staff retention and getting teachers and staff, aides, everybody in front of those students, I know it's really not your job to do that, but it's partly your job. I know that it comes from HR and everything, but what do you see that we can do better to retain our staff? I know that, you know, I've made a couple of visits, you know, specifically for special education, had numerous parents calling me about some of the stuff that we've failed to accommodate their students with. And I know that it's a work in progress, and I know that we're understaffed. Our staff is underpaid, and we're doing the best we can with what we've got right now. But it's not meeting the mark for our students. So what is the how on how we can get better? What do you guys see as an area we can focus on? What do you need from the board? I mean, what can we do? What creative outlets can you tap into? Because like you said, we have over 2,000 special needs students out here. And I don't want to see them get pushed by the wayside. And I don't think you guys are doing that by any means. But I just want to know what the how is, how we're going to do this.
We've been working in collaboration with HR and reaching out to staffing companies. However, if my calculations serve me correctly, we have 11 vacant positions, but currently have 5 applications in the queue. So we see applications are starting to come in, so we're jumping quickly on those applications to get teachers in front of students.
But the question then begs, is 11 enough? Because the special ed teachers that I speak with indicate to me that the amount of work that they're expected to do is more than doubled. And they could definitely benefit by having more special ed teachers as opposed to having more work, I guess you would say. I mean, is 11 going to do it? Is that going to fill our need?
We would never decline for having additional FTEs.
And do you? But is that something that would solely I'm not saying it'll 100% fix the burnout rate. This is an area, though, of the teaching career where that we see the highest burnout rate.
Yeah.
You guys live it every day. And Ms. McDonald, you came from other divisions. What have you seen that's worked there that we're not doing? Can you bring anything to the table on that? And I mean, strengthen our special needs program as far as not only with the students, but the staff. I know that, you know, a lot of people say that they've had a hard day at work, right? But there's days where these folks come home beat up. I mean, they get broken emotionally, and I hate to see that for our staff. And partly you do got to know what you're getting into when you get into special education, but as far as that burnout rate is, what can we do to retain those folks or rotate them within the school system, or rotate them throughout the schools, so that they don't get burnt out? I know that, you know, in some of my visits, we've seen that those teachers in those certain classrooms or in those certain schools become pretty tight knit, and they don't want to kind of rotate around, and that's fine. You know, I'm glad they're there, but if they can build that coalition amongst each other and stay focused in their school and on those students, you know, I'm happy to have it. But I would love to see something where we can retain this staff just a little bit more. So anything you guys need from us, we all have email addresses. Please hit us up, or if you have ideas now, please shoot them out to us and the public, because we would love to hear that.
Will do.
The last part of our section is the policy 435P on restraint and seclusion. This policy is required to be reviewed and updated annually, and so we're not recommending any changes to the policy at this time, but are happy to field any questions.
I do have a question. Ms. Jordan, anything coming from VDOE or the state on this kind of, or on 435P? Anything new coming down the pipe?
Not that I'm aware of. We have the General Assembly is going to reconvene at the beginning of the year. That may produce something, but not that I've heard of at this time.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. All right. Well, at this time, I'm going to welcome Ms. Carter on up. This is Tanessa Carter, our Supervisor of Elementary Literacy, and she's going to talk to us about our Virginia Literacy Act and its current update. Thank you.
Hello, Board and Dr. Hummer. I am typically just a worker bee behind the scenes, so I'm going to try and not be so nervous that I completely flub this up.
No, I've already
but
messed up a couple times. You're fine.
I'm not going to lie, it makes me feel a little bit better. So a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about tonight was the status of our state training, the required training for teachers, the job-embedded professional learning support that's occurring, our current learning walk data, student data, and then the updates to the division literacy plan that we just had to make and why. So, as you know, part of the Virginia Literacy Act is that it requires our teachers to participate in, again, required training. These are a list of the pathways that were offered. We are, not all divisions offered all of these pathways. Some divisions just simply said you will take the Canvas course, but we really wanted to honor the training that the teachers have already taken in some circumstances. So at this point, we have 100% of our elementary and secondary teachers signed up and registered for their training, which is, whew, that was a lot of work.
This is compulsory, though, correct?
It is required.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they better be 100%.
Yes, it better be 100%, yes. But I will say there was a lot of delay with the state. What we thought was going to be a 2-week turnaround time, and I'm also somewhat naive sometimes, turned into a month turnaround time from the state. So they were a little bit more delayed in receiving and actually getting access to their training. But almost everybody has now received it, but they have all been registered. Our primary focus right now is providing support to our teachers. As you all know, our teachers already have a full plate, so this required training really just added even more to that plate. So right now, we have a team of literacy coaches and reading specialists who truly are absolutely phenomenal and are the backbone to this process. Some of the ways that we are supporting our teachers is job-embedded coaching, something that we have always done. Teachers at any time, any staff member really, can turn to their coach and ask for feedback or just assistance with anything that they need, especially this literacy related. We also have literacy coach and reading specialist support through professional learning and planning. We ask that each building administrator provide 2 touch points with the literacy coach, one for professional learning and one for monthly support through a lesson planning cycle. That lesson planning cycle goes through the planning using our high-quality instructional material, the delivery of instruction, learning walks, as well as then feedback to our teachers. We have at this point completed 3 cycles. However, we are only on our 2nd literacy walk, and I'll go through that data with you in a moment. And then, of course, just making sure that we're providing them time. Time is a commodity that we all need more of, but we are asking on our professional learning days, and of course, teachers have their unencumbered planning days to use to work on these. But we do recognize that some of this training will have to be done outside of contract hours. So we have budgeted, and I believe you all know this, we have budgeted stipends as well as recertification points to compensate them for that time outside of contract hours. The schedule, this is just a brief snapshot of the schedule from September through January of what the training and the literacy walks were focused on. We did use the Canvas course progression to develop this, simply because the majority of our teachers did choose the Canvas pathway. So some schools, Middletown, for example, has a lot of their teachers have already gone through letters. So a lot of their support does focus on where they're at within letters. The majority, though, do use the Canvas progression. So you can see in September, we were just talking about implementation of the VLA. In October, we talked about what was science-based literacy instruction, and what does that actually look like. The look for that month was just effective use of their curriculum materials. In November, we focused on data literacy, so how to use your data to then determine what next steps you need to make for your students. The focus for that month for learning walks was effective use of resources again, explicit instruction and student engagement. And as you can see, these become cumulative as we go through. So we're not looking for it one time and then not looking for it again. We really are looking for that growth over time. And then one thing to point out about the learning walks as well is these are non-evaluative learning walks. We really are going on through and looking, and it really is more of a reflection of our support, and so that we can, we use that data to help guide us as we're determining how do we need to adjust our supports, what additional professional learning may need to occur.
Quick question for you. Who's doing the training?
Literacy, so the teachers have their Canvas course or letters or IMSE, so they're getting that training, but then the literacy coaches.
Is that online? I'm sorry, is that online?
The Canvas course is an online module. Letters is sometimes in person, most of the time in person. I'm sorry, the sessions, the professional learning sessions are in person, and then the work is done on their own.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
All right, so some of the data for the learning walks, as you can see, the components that have been most frequently, and this data was pulled mid-November in preparation for this. So I do have updated numbers, but the literacy components that were observed the most was phonics and comprehension, which is to be expected. And then within those learning walks, what we're looking for is high leverage practices. So effective use of curriculum materials is one of those high leverage practices that we're really focused on. So effective use of curriculum materials. 84% of our teachers demonstrated effective use of materials at that point. The key word there is effective. For many of them, this is relatively new. So learning how to not just use it as a script, but really use it as a tool for teaching. I need to get a drink of water. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
And then expectations are clear and concise. 85%. Teacher provides models, multiple examples, 70%. Implements research-based instructional routines, 83%. Teacher provides meaningful feedback, 83%. And then pace of lesson was brisk and appropriate for students, 79%.
So who does the observation and determines if it's been effectively done?
Good question. So we have part of our division literacy plan, and something we implemented 2 years ago, maybe even more, was we developed literacy teams. Within the literacy coaches, reading specialists are all on those teams. Then at the building level, we asked, as part of building level literacy plans, we asked them to come up with who is their literacy team. In most circumstances, it's the administrator, a literacy coach, a reading specialist, classroom teachers, whoever they feel fits or can really speak to the learning walks. Now, what I do to prepare, because not all of those people have been trained to the same level, is I create a monthly video that walks through what that high leverage practice is, but then what the look-fors are, and we kind of talk about what those look-fors are. And I also ask them to pair up when they go in for those learning walks. The really important thing is to be able to leave that learning walk, discuss what you saw, and come to a common conclusion.
Thank you.
And then student engagement and opportunities to prep for practice. Frequent opportunities to practice was 81%. Opportunities for practice are varied so that students can respond in multiple ways was 66%. Providing immediate corrective affirmative feedback was 85%. And then opportunities for practice that are culturally and linguistically diverse. For culturally and linguistically diverse students was 63%. So we're going to use that data to really monitor over time the learning walk data. So what we want to see, that was more of a baseline data. What we want to see is adjustments over time. I'm sorry. All right, and then our VALS data for our K through 3 students. As you can see, we have 3 risk bands. That's some of the data that we get from VALS. High risk means that those students are high risk of needing some intense intervention or not meeting that. We want kids reading by 3rd grade. Those students that are high risk, we're saying they are high risk for not meeting that goal or target. So as you can see, kindergarten students, and this was an assessment that was given in October, so it's relatively early into the year. Kindergarten students, 32% of them came in high risk. First grade, 24% of our first graders are high risk. Second grade, 31%. And third grade, we have 36% of our students.
So quick question with this data was this broken out in any way, shape, or form to show the EL students that are involved in this?
I can get that data, yes.
That would be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I guess if they end up falling into high risk, I guess they're getting an IEP.
Not an IEP, but something very similar. So part of the Virginia Literacy Act is for students that fall into that high risk range, they get what's called a student reading plan. And that student reading plan, we used the VALS assessment, which not only does it give us a risk band, but it gives us instructional indicators. And those instructional indicators really help guide us in developing a goal and action steps for those students.
Okay.
Thank you. I would like to see that
Yeah.
data, please.
Yeah.
We can get that to you,
Absolutely.
Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. And then for 4th and 5th grade students, VALS assessment does not yet go all the way up to 4th and 5th grade. We're hoping that that will be a pilot next year. But for this year, we needed to be able to provide some data or give our teachers a way to assess students to determine what their needs are. So we chose the core assessing multiple measures as a screener. We use it as a fluency screener. Once we do the fluency screener, and let me back up a little bit, this data is for 4th and 5th grade students who did not pass their SOL in the previous spring. So right now we have at 4th grade, 46% of the students who did not pass their SOL, 46% of them were actually on or above for words correct per minute. 55% were actually on or above for accuracy. However, 53 were below and 45% were below for accuracy. And then you can see the data for 5th grade, 47% and 64% were above for words correct per minute and accuracy, and then 53 and 36 were below. So what we did is we then took that data for students that did not meet that fluency screener. Then the core assessing multiple measures also has a diagnostic, has several diagnostic assessments that then even has a great little decision tree that you can follow. But you use that decision tree to drill down to figure out exactly what that student's instructional indicators really are.
Thank you.
All right, and then on December 6th, we had to turn in our updated division literacy plan to the state. Yay, done, signed, checked off. Woo! Really, all that the state asked us to include was a timeline for communication. However, after discussions with them, really what they were looking for was just a list of our goals and action steps. So I included that and indicated whether it was in progress or something that we had completed. We added instructional materials for our learning centers to our list of approved curriculum items, and we added supplemental and intervention materials to that list as well.
Okay.
Just to summarize, teacher readiness, 100% of our elementary and secondary teachers are registered and ready to go with their training. We have completed 3 lesson planning cycles. There's the list of the look-fors that we have looked for so far. Student readiness, VALS. What I did is I combined this data for K-3. So low risk, 36% of our students are low risk and just receiving core instruction. 35% of our students are at moderate risk and are receiving intensification of instruction, meaning flexible groupings, intervention in some cases. And then 29% are high risk. And those are those students that have that student rating plan. Course for 4th and 5th grade, 775 students were assessed. 54% were below the benchmark for words correct per minute, and 41% were below for fluency. They are also receiving intensification of instruction. And then that's just a list of the materials that we added to our updated plan.
Just one kind of thing before we adjourn. On the student readiness part, I mean, that's our clients, right? You know, at the end of the day. For the kids who didn't pass the spring SOL at 775, are we getting better? Are we staying the same? You know, well, I'd like to see what those numbers look like tracked over the last couple of years, because if you know the literacy plan isn't working, maybe we need to make some adjustments, because it's cool to see all the data and see what percentage we've got passing or comprehending stuff, but at the end of the day, that's the number I'm really looking at.
Oh, absolutely. And part of the Virginia Literacy Act and the training that teachers are going through is really learning those high leverage instructional practices that most likely they didn't get in college. And, you know, there's an art to teaching. You don't just open up a curriculum guide and just read from the book. You've got to actually know how, I know, shocking,
what I
right?
do.
I know. You've got to actually know how to use that teacher knowledge and apply. So those are all some of the things that we're learning and growing together in those instructional strategies, routines, things like that. And I'm already tracking that data, so I will be able to keep that updated.
Yeah,
for
I
you.
appreciate that. And I know that, you know, not all of our teachers have went through that traditional route
Yeah.
of going through college, you know, to learn how to become a teacher. A lot of
Yeah.
folks, this is their second career, and maybe they went to college for something else,
Yeah.
or maybe they came from, you know, a career and came into teaching. So I'm not discounting anything as far as continuing education. I think we all should get continuing education, whatever field we're in. You know, keeps the tools sharp. But I would like to see how we're tracking that data, and I would also like to see how it's tracking versus, or I guess in conjunction with the correlation of traditional teachers and non-traditional teachers, and seeing how those assessments or the students that are being assessed are panning out. See if everything correlates there, or if not, maybe there's something else. But 775 is still a lot.
I'm a big data nerd and really enjoy spreadsheets, so I'm tracking it 15 different ways.
I will nerd out on data with you any day. I love it.
My husband thinks I'm weird. It's fine.
And Mr. Atkins, if I may add
there you go.
also, there is, I think we share the same sense of urgency to actually see market improvement on student performance, but I also want to make certain that in the future, we'll do a much better job of setting realistic expectations around the difference between starting training, completing training, and teachers being effective with the use of training. So teachers have just begun the work. They have not completed that work. And the work related to the Virginia Literacy Act is the part that most people have not had the experience on. Tanessa spoke to the art of teaching. This is more about the science of that experience, and that's a lot for our teachers. And I'm making absolutely no excuses because we're determined to ensure that our children can read by third grade. But I also think we have to make certain that we set realistic expectations about when we think or expect that to manifest, because I think we only had one rung of teachers who've even started to finish, right? And so the efforts of the teachers who've completed the PD have not even begun to show yet. I think it was first grade teachers from last year. Their second grade students are the ones who we may be able to see some data in terms of improvement, and that's just because they completed that year of it. So I think we want to look at that progression as well. And then the other piece that I will share about this is that these are our earliest learners, and so struggling with reading at K1, 2, and 3 is not necessarily an anomaly, and this is one assessment among many. So we'll keep all of those data points in mind and to try to make sure some of those things are clear for you as we move forward.
I look forward to seeing those numbers improve, and I understand
sir.
it's a science, but you know, every year those kids are going to be moving on.
No doubt
and,
about it.
You know, I just don't want to miss an opportunity while we got them.
Fair?
Well, and one thing that I think we should be mindful and aware of is if you're looking at past data, and you may already be doing this, is to couple the sort of the percentage of new students that are EL students that have come into the division and have come into our community versus what they were before, because that's certainly going to affect this number drastically, whether they're K through 3 or higher. So I would like to, you know, are you looking at that as well, or?
So there's SOL data that we can look at, but for our early learners, our PALS data, which PALS is what it was before it was VALS.
Sure.
And it was not as all encompassing
I see.
an assessment. So to compare those two assessments really would be like comparing apples
Apples
and
to
oranges.
I understand.
However, we can continuously look at the data as compared to our EL students
Sure.
or our students with disabilities.
Because I think that's a group of students that get left behind too often.
Absolutely.
So-
However, I will say that I'm really excited. Within this training, we are learning more and more that some of the ways that we teach foundational reading is is just as good for our, or not just as good, but it is what our EL students and our students with disabilities need.
Oh, absolutely.
So the more we get better and better with just best practices,
Sure.
we'll see gains across the board.
All right. Thank you.
I'm excited. Thank you all.
Yep. Any other questions?
Good to go.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. And that concludes our instructional committee offerings for this month, and I'm here to entertain any additional questions.
I actually have one.
Yes, sir.
With regards to special ed specifically, I guess I'm on an EL bent today. I don't know why, but I am. I'm wondering if I understand that we'd have EL students that speak only Spanish. What are the number of EL teachers / special ed teachers with dual certification? How many of those do we have?
I don't think we know that number right now, but we can get that because
If
it
any.
won't be high.
Yeah, we can look into that, but it's probably not many.
Yeah.
I mean, does it exist is another question.
Yeah.
You know, is that something that exists? Is that something we should be looking to find?
I mean, it certainly wouldn't hurt, but finding folks who are duly endorsed in EL and special education will likely be very unique.
I would think, but
Yeah,
it's
but it
certainly
wouldn't hurt us
something.
to find someone like that or find a
Right.
few if we can. And if we can be the division that recruits them, I mean, we'll be happy about it.
I mean, I don't want this to be a pie in the sky thing or you know, like drop everything and do this. It's just,
Yeah.
I'm thinking you've got students who don't speak the language and are in special needs or have special
Mm-hmm.
needs. And then, you know, if there's an instructor that doesn't have that background in teaching EL,
Mm-hmm.
then that student gets twice as lost.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. And I think a better route in the event that we cannot find or recruit a category of teachers who fits that dual endorsement is maybe incentivizing our current special ed teachers to pursue that additional endorsement and seeing what we can do to fund the cost for that.
That very well may have been my next suggestion. I'm not going to say.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments from the board?
Thank you guys all for your time this evening. I know a lot of folks came out, and we don't usually have this big of a crowd for an instruction committee meeting, but I'm glad to have it. So
Absolutely.
thank you all for what you do. Appreciate it.
All right. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
And do we have a second?
Second.
The motion has been properly made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned.